Trek favorites. What are yours? Welcome to Trek Favorites. I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is the show where you get to hear from my Trek friends and my tech friends about some of their favorite episodes of Star Trek. Now, it can be any episode from any series. It can be pretty much anything from anything Star Trek. The idea, though, is it has to be one of their favorites. And I didn't say the favorite. I said a favorite because it's almost impossible to pick a favorite out of all the series and all the movies and everything. This time around, we have Mr. Jeff Gamet with us. Jeff, welcome. It's good to see you.
It's awesome to see you. And I love that we're getting to do a show in a different context from what we've done before. So this is like a brand new thing for me with you.
It is, and this has been a lot of fun for me. We took a little bit of a break over the holidays, and that break stretched into January because of CES. But we're back now, and we'll be doing shows on a much more regular basis if I have anything to say about it. And since I'm the host, I kind of do.
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah. I do want to say, though, folks, that this time around, we're going to be talking about an episode of Discovery. And so I want to put a big fat spoiler alert up here that if you have not watched Discovery Season 2 especially, that's what we're going to be talking about. You may want to postpone this episode or put it on pause or just skip it for right now.
Or just go watch it. We'll sit here and wait.
Well, yeah, that's fine too. Most of the other series, they've been out for literally decades, and so we don't worry too much about spoilers. Discovery is a little bit different. So again, if you have not watched Season 2 of Discovery, then it may be good to pause or skip this episode. Okay, so we have that out of the way. We're going to be talking about Discovery Season 2, Episode 8, If Memory Serves. And Jeff, I was so happy you picked this episode because this is a really pivotal episode in Series 2 in the whole story arc.
Mm-hmm.
And it really resonated with me. I do want to say that, we don't do recaps here, but at the same time, we try to make reference to the episode. It's a little bit more difficult with Discovery since they are not self-contained episodes, but they are more part of the story arc. The easiest way, I think, to identify this one is where Pike and Burnham, Spock and Burnham go back to Talos 4. And you see the Telosians and, Vina and all that. So that hopefully will give folks a point of reference. So with that rather lengthy introduction, Jeff, sorry to make you sit through it, but I have to ask you.
That was great. I couldn't wait to hear what the episode was about.
Okay. So why this one? I mean, of all the Discovery episodes and in the story arc of Season 2, why this one?
It was a few things for me. First, I love the I love the Spock lore and the Vulcan lore because so much of it started from like offhanded things that were tossed into the original series, and they just grew, and so we have this whole mythology about Vulcan and Spock's past, and now Burnham ties into Spock's past. So on the one level, I really enjoy that, but then when you take that and set it aside, this episode I see as the pivotal episode in Season 2. And this is the episode where everyone has to face up to the consequences for everything that they've been doing all the way through Season 2 up to this point. And I love that this episode could have been written where at the end we have this really nice wrap up and everything is fine. But they didn't do that. They left us with the aftermath of what everyone has to deal with now. And I love that they did not take an easy way out, and that all of these characters are in a situation where they have to deal with there are consequences. And I just think it was set up and executed really well across the board, not just with the Spock Burnham relationship, but we also have the whole thing with Stamets and Colbert, and then Ash Tyler fits into that also, and then we have excuse me, then we have Pike and Vina, and to me that was just a really nice treat, because we get to see the emotional investment that those two had in each other, and that they still have in each other, and you can feel the pain and the heartbreak that they both have, and they both know that they're on their own life paths, and those paths will probably never intersect. Now, of course, we know they do later on, but at this point in their lives, excuse me, they have no idea that they will be reunited at some point. So they're essentially star-crossed lovers, brokenhearted, and both of them trying to make the best of this moment that they have together. And it was great to get to see that this is more than a superficial, oh, he's hot and he's the only human that they brought me so far, that one's mine. We don't get that feeling from the interaction that we see between Pike and Vina.
No, and in that particular area, I definitely want to go. There are a lot of places I want to go, but Vina tells Pike that she's already spent a lifetime with him, and of course that's through the Telosian's illusion world for her. And so I find that interesting, and I find that interesting that there's still that balance that Vina is sort of defending the Telosians, that they're not. They don't mean to be evil, or they don't mean to be bad. This is the way they experience things, and their price for helping Spock is to have Burnham relive for them one of her memories. The wedge
this very painful memory.
Yeah, that it was driven. So it's obviously a highly emotional memory for both she and Spock, and that's their price. And again, Vina makes the point that they're not evil, but
she says,
what they want.
You see, I actually had to write this one down so I'd remember it and get it right, because I knew we'd talk about this. Here we go. Vina talking to Burnham after they've started to have the exchange in the menagerie area underneath the surface, and Vina looks to Burnham and she goes, "You see, they aren't unnecessarily cruel," and that just summed up the Telosians so well. I mean, the Telosians to me are a really creepy species. They are very selfish. I think they're cruel. I think they're sadistic, and at the same time, they can do nice things. Like in this episode, they help Spock sort out his problem with nonlinear time, and so in the end, Spock benefits. But this wasn't an altruistic move that the Telosians made. They totally manipulated Spock and Burnham so that they could get their own rush off of the emotional damage that both of these people have suffered over their whole lives, and it just felt dirty and creepy what they did. Which, I mean, I say that, but at the same time, oh my God, that's so great. Thank you for characters that are not black hat, white hat.
Good. I'm glad you wrapped it up that way, because it's funny. I didn't get that sense of the creepiness quite the same way you did. I thought it was interesting that they did exact a bit of a price for helping Spock.
But at the same price, yeah.
But at the same time, they've been quote unquote caring for Vina all this time, and allowing her to. Now, I understand it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship, that they're getting something off of the emotions that are being generated by what we assume is the life that she and Pike, I guess the construct of Pike,
Yeah, the fantasy Pike.
Fantasy Pike, good. So yeah, I almost see it more as a symbiotic thing, and they didn't require Vina to stay with them. They offered her what was something very, very desirable, and she opted to take it rather than reality. And eventually, we see Pike do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
After the accident, and we're going back to the original series stuff. So I can't decide how I feel about this. I just don't see them as creepy or unnecessarily cruel. It's almost like, okay, this is what they need to live, and in this case, Vina and eventually Pike need that to live, and so everybody wins.
Everybody wins, but they win the way the Telosians want. To me, the Telosians are just a really manipulative species, and they've been presented like, okay, so when we first see them in the original Star Trek series, in the cage, they're presented through the lens of the 1960s and 1960s storytelling and character development. And so they have that kind of I don't want to say malevolent undertone, but they totally do. And in the end, they are presented more like the victims, and they're just trying to get by. And Vina is a resource that's ultimately helping them out. And now we get to have the same aliens presented in the lens of 21st century storytelling, and in a story, excuse me, where we have more time to tell what's going on. And so I like that the characters were developed more, and so we could get more of an emotional feeling of what the Telosians are up to. And my takeaway from that was, man, this is not a species I would ever trust, ever, because they're just going to manipulate me for their own needs. And then in the end, they're going to be like, it's going to be like an emotionally abusive relationship, because they're going to make me feel like I'm doing this because I want to, even though they've manipulated me. And now I feel like I'm where I need to be in this relationship with them because that's what I have to do. And I mean, that's just straight up manipulation.
Okay, so and you're right. Back in the original series, they were. I mean, let's face it. They had captured Pike, and we're going to use Pike and Vina for breeding stock to create. At least the implication was a race of humans that would have been doing nothing but providing the stimulus for the Telosians. I grant you that's pretty creepy. Yeah, that's pretty bad. On the other hand, as you said later, that they revealed that, okay, the illusion was sort of their drug, and that's how they got to the point where they are now. And now I can't. I'm defending the Telosians for some reason. I have no idea why, but now they could very easily have tricked or manipulated Burnham and Spock into remaining there, but they didn't. I mean, there was a clear give and take. You want this, we'll do it, but this is our price. But the price was paid, and then
they even went a step farther and helped Burnham and Spock when they didn't have to.
Yes.
See, complex characters. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%. How did you feel? I know there was a lot of controversy when this was first broadcast, or whatever you call streaming now, that the Telosians' look had been altered a bit. And they weren't quite the big bulbous heads that they had been in the 60s.
I was fine with it. Um, it which I didn't know if I would be, because I remember when I went to watch the episode the first time, knowing that we'd be on Talos 4, because it was no secret. That wasn't a spoiler because it was in the previews and teasers. What threw me was the voices, because the voices in the original episodes that they were in, they were much higher. So having those deeper voices for Telosians seemed a little weird to me. But at the same time, how many Telosians did we actually get to interact with before? It was what, 3? And of those 3, how many spoke? I think 1.
We have 1,
so,
maybe 2.
Yeah, it was a very small number, so not representative of how they could sound overall. So at first, the deeper voices threw me a little bit. I was okay with the alterations to their physical look. I mean, they kept the pulsing veins on their heads. And to me, that was a big thing. If they had taken that part away, it would have felt. I think that's when I would have had a problem with the design of the characters. Now, I know a lot of people had a problem with the look of Vina, because the actress that plays Vina in Discovery doesn't look exactly like the actress who played Vina in the original Trek. Whatever. I didn't have any problem with that at all. I felt like she played the character of Vina well. And that's what really matters.
Agreed, 100%. And, let's not forget that, the image you're seeing of Vina, I mean, if we're going to split hairs and really be geeks here, the image you're seeing of Vina is the one that she chose, or they chose to project. Because in the original series, Pike gets his choice of how he wants Vina to look. And so, this could be
this might be Spock's representation of Vina.
Could be.
I mean, for all we know, in the Cage, every single person that sees Vina sees her differently. Right. Which, okay, if we're going to totally nerd out on this, we already have precedent for that in the Star Trek universe. Do you remember the salt creature that appeared as Dr. McCoy's ex?
Sure.
And everyone saw that salt creature through their own lens. So she was whatever woman each of those people wanted to see.
So interesting.
There we go.
Hadn't drawn that particular comparison, but yeah, good point. Good point. I love the way they started out this episode by going back and really laying the groundwork, because
yes.
The Discovery audience potentially, a lot of them potentially never saw the original. And so they needed just a little bit of backstory so this would just not come completely out of left field.
And it was done so well.
Oh, and when they brought it up, I distinctly remember the first time, that I watched it. And it's like, I can't believe they did it. And I love the fact that they did it. And then as the story developed, it's like, okay, this is exactly why they did it. They should have. It's perfect.
It was wonderful. I love that they used original footage and didn't reshoot those scenes with the new actors. So, they just gave it to us exactly as it is. The 1960s original costumes without the black collars, the original actors, everything. It was, and the original music. I mean, that was just done so well. Yeah. And even down to the original typeface that they used for yes. Star Trek.
Yes.
That was just absolutely fantastic. And that could have been a really no, let me rephrase that. That was a potentially very risky move doing the previously the way they did, but I think it came off perfectly, and I absolutely loved it.
I felt like it added a sense of time, that this much, an undetermined amount of time had passed, but clearly the Captain Pike of originally, which was Jeffrey Hunter, was different than the Captain Pike of today, and the Vina was a little bit different, and the Telosians were a little bit different. Spock obviously was different. I love the fact that they kept the singing plants.
Oh yes, okay. Here's all the little things that I picked up from the planet. The singing plants, the sound of the Telosians creating an illusion, that was the same. The sound of Telosians appearing or disappearing, that was the same. They used the same sound effects as they used in the original. And like even down to the end of the episode when the Telosians help out Spock and Burnham and trick Section 31, when Spock and Burnham beam onto the Section 31 ship, it's the original transporter sound, not the current transporter sound.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yes, just the sound that they did, it was just so perfect. And then, yes, and then the blue plants. I think they did a great job of reconstructing the menagerie itself. And it didn't feel like they were trying to make it overtly, hey, look, we have a better budget, so we made a cooler looking menagerie. I mean, it was obviously construction, but it matched, and it felt like we were in that same menagerie that was from the cage.
I love that. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about Giorgio, but I love I love her attitude, and I love the fact that she's commenting back on the Section 31 ship that they tried that once on her, and she basically she blew them up, and she them along with their singing plants. There's so many of those little references that are so much fun. And so in keeping with that character in this new world, and sort of trying to manage or deal with, okay, this is what I did with them. I just blew them all up. But now we're having to deal with them.
Yes. I love that Giorgio is playing everyone. And I love that she has no pretense about that either. It's, to her, it's like, yeah, this is just what you do, and deal with it, because that's how life is, and this is who I am. And it's great because Giorgio is obviously a bad guy, but even with that character, it's not just black and white. So I love that. I love that she has her own motives for everything, and she, I'm actually looking forward to the Giorgio spinoff series, because they're supposedly doing another Trek series about Section 31 and the Giorgio character.
Oh yeah, how could you not be looking forward to it? I know, because she's not. Oh no, I better not say that. I'll get emails from the Star Wars people. But she's not a one-dimensional bad guy, as you said. You have the whole way through. You have this sense that she had, no matter what's going on, she has her own agenda and her own way of looking at things, and it's completely cockeyed. It's not Starfleet. And I love it. I know that bothers a lot of people, but I love it because it just adds another dimension to the storytelling, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with the spinoff.
Yeah, and it's clear that Giorgio genuinely cares for Burnham. In her own Terran Empire mirror universe way. She genuinely cares for Burnham.
Yeah, absolutely. Go back to Stamets and that whole thing. This was a very, there's some touching things there. There's some. I mean, listen, somebody came back from the dead, basically, which Saru points out, and we'll talk about that. Yeah. And so, how are you dealing with this? And why didn't Stamets let him go? And why? And how is this all working? And everybody's trying to work through, as you said at the outset, all these things that have happened in the past, and trying to figure out their place and where everything fits back together. And I thought that was intriguing. I love the fact that Saru actually, let them beat the daylights out of each other to the point that, okay, we're just tired and we're not going to beat up on each other anymore.
That fight was so well done because it could have been an action scene, and it wasn't. It was an emotional scene that happened to have some fighting in it. And to me, that's what made that so powerful, because we have these two characters that both of them have, to some degree, come back from the dead, in a manner of speaking. And how do you emotionally deal with confronting the person that killed you, and now you have to live on the same ship in this confined space with that person? I mean, that is just not something that people routinely have to deal with. And
but also there's another dimension to that, because the person that killed him, even though it looks like him, was not the one that killed him.
Right. But he has the memories of the person that killed him.
Right.
And I mean, it's a really complex thing, which I just loved about that whole scene, because Culber comes in and he's looking for a fight. And Tyler is sitting there, and when he sees him come in, he knows what's coming. Now, he could get up and leave. He could get up and fight, like, immediately and take the offensive. But he chooses to sit there. And he tries to not engage, until he just has to engage, which I thought was a really interesting change for that specific character. And then they have this fight, and the fight felt very real to me. And because it wasn't this superhero, roundhouse punch and sort of thing, and people flipping through the air. It's a couple guys that are just tumbling around and smashing into stuff and pushing each other, and then in the end, they're both standing there, and you have Culber. He says, "I don't even know who I am," and that's where Ash could have just like decked him and laid him out, but he didn't. They just kind of stood there for a minute, kind of leaning on each other. And then Ash leaves, and Culber goes and sits down, and nothing has been resolved. And it's great because nothing has been resolved. Culber doesn't feel any better about himself. He doesn't feel like he's found his sense of identity. Ash doesn't feel like he's resolved anything. He certainly doesn't act like he has emotionally absolved himself of responsibility in any way. And so they're both still carrying this heavy emotional weight. And in another TV series, that would have been the point where they magically were better, and they would have sat down at the bar and had a drink together or something like that. And which also brings in the whole Stamets side of it. I mean, here's Stamets, the love of his life, his husband, is back from the dead. What more could he possibly want? And yet, in one aspect, he's like, I have this person back. And then he starts to realize slowly, I never had him back. And oh my God, I'm losing him again. And so it's this heartbreaking thing that's playing out. And Culber, on one hand, you'd think, well, maybe he should be more empathetic. But on the other hand, holy crap, this guy just came back from the dead. He's got a lot on his emotional plate right now, dealing with this other guy that's being sappy. It's so great to have you back thing. He's not in a place to be able to deal with that. And I love that they let that play out and just hang for us, as opposed to, they could have pulled Culber out of the organic pod transporter thing from, I think it was in the previous episode, and then hugged each other and been so happy and gone back to their cabin and had a celebration, and everyone lives happily ever after. And we don't get that, which I think is fantastic, because that's not what would really happen if a scenario as insane and fantastical as that played out. I mean, the people coming out of that, they're going to be profoundly different, and not for the least of which, one of them's coming back from the dead.
So yes, I agree with you. I mean, I like the fact, and these are subtleties that I'm not sure are appreciated by the folks who are not or have not enjoyed season 2. That they don't wrap things. They kind of never. They very seldom wrap anything up neatly. There are always threads out there that are going to feed things a little bit later. Your observations about the fight scene are spot on, and I have missed it completely, because this was not a fight scene that is choreographed, or, as you say, that looks like a dance. I mean, it looks like two guys wrestling and picking up whatever they can find to hit each other with, and they get in their shots, and none of them look devastating enough that they should not get back up, but they do. They just look like, that had to hurt. But the whether it's the passion, the desire to defend yourself, the anger, whatever is driving them on, and so that you're right, that adds to the feel of, I guess, the emotions, and the way it almost feels like it winds up and then winds down slowly, and then they just both kind of walk away.
Yeah. Yes. And did you catch the follow-up to that, where Stamets and Culber are sitting together in the mess hall, and Stamets says, your hand is hurt, we should get that looked at. And Culber comes back with something to the effect of, yes, it hurts. This is the first time I've actually felt anything. Why would I want to change that?
Yeah. That's it. This episode, there's so many things here that if you stop and look at it, and I think you can say this about many Star Trek episodes of anything, but this one in particular, there's so many things that have come together, and we said when we started out, this is a pivotal episode for the second season of Discovery. And it makes me want to go back, and it's like, okay, I want to go back now in light of this and rewatch the rest of the series, if not the whole thing, at least from here, to see how some of those things get resolved. Even though I've already done it once, I think that there's so many. I appreciated it again, and this would have been my third or fourth rewatch. But the more you look at this, and I think it's a tribute. You mentioned it earlier, 1960s storytelling versus 21st century storytelling. So many more subtleties, so many more threads, so many things that it would lose something if they try. It would lose a lot if they try to just wrap up everything into a neat package at the end of every episode.
Yeah, and I'm glad they don't. And I'm also glad that this episode happened from another perspective, because excuse me, this was episode 8 in season 2.
Yeah.
So we've had essentially 7 episodes where you had the crew of Discovery getting to do all these crazy things and make all of these crazy decisions to try and just get resolutions where people aren't dying, and they're making a lot of decisions that should have repercussions. And this episode comes along and we start seeing repercussions. And I think that's great.
Agreed. I feel like we can't leave this episode without saying something about the Spock-Burnham relationship. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. And again, we're going to try to isolate it to just this far in the timeline where we are with episode 8. Does Spock forgive Burnham for the hateful things she said to him when they were kids? Do you think at this point, or do you think it's still there?
Oh, it is absolutely there. I mean, before Spock and Burnham get back on their shuttlecraft and leave Talos 4, it's clear to me that the forgiveness that Burnham has been desperately seeking ever since that night she ran away towards Vulcan's Forge, which we'll have to talk about that too. Because how can we not? But anyhow, she's had this overpowering guilt that has been a core part of who she is ever since that night she tried to run away, feeling like she was making the best choice to protect Spock. So doing what she has done over and over, self-sacrifice to benefit others. And Spock, he's like, no, that was a really crappy thing you did. You hurt me really bad. And what you really taught me was that emotion is crap, humans are crap, and that I shouldn't have ever trusted you or looked up to you. And that's what Burnham is left with at that point. And it comes down to, for Spock, he's a Vulcan, he's a Starfleet officer. He will do his job and work with her as a Starfleet officer, but he is not in a place right now where he feels like he can forgive her and be family again. That's my take on where they were before they left Talos 4.
Well, and the only thing that makes me wonder a little bit about that was when Spock and Burnham got back to Discovery, and Pike and Spock are seeing each other for the first time, and Spock gets that little, it's a grin on his face, and Pike even calls him out on it, and Spock acknowledges, yes, it is. That seemed not out of character, but just that's why I asked. Yeah, and that's why it's the question, is everything basically right back with Spock now that he's experiencing time in a linear fashion and is not, feeling all these compulsions he had before?
I think that at this point in the season, Spock is being treated the same way as everything else, where it's not a binary thing, where he was broken, now he's fixed, let's move on. He at this point is beginning to heal. And the beginning of that healing started with the Telosians fixing his time perception. And now he can start fixing the other things that he needs to address in his life.
Okay. All right. I'll accept that, because I loved it. I just was not quite, I'm still a little bit unresolved as to what it meant and where it was coming from.
Isn't that awesome?
Other than just the camaraderie of Spock and Pike.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get out of here, Jeff, that you say you wanted to talk about Vulcan's Forge, and I want to make sure you do that.
So this is one of those things that was almost an offhand thing. So Vulcan's Forge comes from the animated series episode Yesteryear, which I believe Peter got to do that one. So if it wasn't me, I'm glad it was Peter. And anyhow, so Spock runs away and runs into Vulcan's Forge. It's like this big, desolate area, and it's very dangerous. And that's where Burnham is running to as well. And she has to deal with the same sort of problems that Spock has to deal with, the same dangers. But it's not the only time we get to experience Vulcan's Forge. There's an episode of Deep Space Nine where Worf and Jadzia are planning to get married, and they're trying to figure out where to go for their honeymoon. And one of the locations that Worf recommends is Vulcan's Forge, and they do the pilgrimage trek across Vulcan's Forge. And Jadzia shoots that one down because she doesn't want to go to some place where it's going to be like very arduous and extremely dangerous. And then in Enterprise, there is a 2 episode story arc where Archer and T'Pol have to go to Vulcan, and they're looking for like a radical Vulcan sect, and so they have to go through Vulcan's Forge, like deep into Vulcan's Forge. So we actually get 2 episodes where we're experiencing that location. And the fun thing for me to go along with that is the leader of this radical cell, when they finally find the person, is T'Pau, the same T'Pau from Star Trek. From oh, holy crap! I just forgot the name of the episode.
Amok Time.
Thank you, Amok Time. Yes, the very same character. So I love how they have really thought about how they tie these elements together, and from little elements that could have just very easily been throwaway story bits, we actually get this deep and complex tapestry that's Vulcan history.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, some of this stuff gets dismissed as fan service, and okay, maybe in places it is, but I don't quite buy it. I think that the writers of all the Star Trek series have done an amazing job of introducing that continuity. Different characters at different stages of their lives, different stages of their careers. Of course, it's delightful when you go back and see a young T'Pau after having seen her in Amok Time as an older, very distinguished statesperson for Vulcan. And there are a million examples, and we're not going to try to do them all here. But just so much of that, I'm like you. I enjoy the continuity. I enjoy the fact that people come in and out, and we're going to be real careful here with this. But we're even seeing some of that in the new Picard series, and it's just more of the same. More of the same in the sense that we are looking at an alternate history of civilization, and which happens to be ours, along with its interaction with others. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think I like that, and I bow to your Trek knowledge, sir. I would not have been able to come up with all those references to Vulcan Forge. So good job.
Well, thank you. And I have an Easter egg for you.
Oh, I'll take it.
And I didn't catch it until I went back to rewatch this episode before we recorded. When Pike is on the Enterprise bridge, and on Discovery Bridge, and they are in the midst of dealing with the Section 31 ship, and so they're at like red alert. Go back and watch the view screens. The big view screen at the front of the bridge. And up in the corners, it has the little alert thing flashing. It's the same alert that we get to see for red alert on the bridge screens in The Wrath of Khan.
Okay, I missed that. I will go back.
I totally missed it, but I saw it when I did my rewatch, and I'm like, how could I have not noticed that before? And my guess is that any time throughout the series when they have the alert thing flashing, it's that exact same graphic.
Yeah, and it wasn't. This is your fault. I can't help but not bring up, the fact that basically the bridge crew, is ready to follow Pike anywhere. It's like I can't ask you to, and yeah, what heading, and that, I mean, it says, I think, so much about this. The message here of a message of Star Trek is that people doing the right thing for the right reasons, and the loyalty that Pike has engendered in this crew.
Yes.
It's the same loyalty that the original series crew had to Kirk. It's the same loyalty that the Next Generation had to Picard, and on and on and on. It just speaks to that so much that, you're the captain and we're going to follow you unless we think you're really wrong. And in this situation, absolutely not. We'll all be court-martialed together.
Yes. And I have to say, I've been thinking for a long time about which character is my favorite in Discovery. It's Tilly.
I'm not surprised coming from you. No.
Oh, Tilly is just the best.
Jeff, that's one of the problems with Trek is I can't find favorites. There's so many good characters. That. And there are episodes that one character who maybe I'm not so fond of, just stands out so much that they then move up into my upper tier. So,
yeah, okay. So let me temper that. My favorite characters in each Star Trek series, it's kind of a sliding scale about where people sit. In Discovery, however, Tilly has consistently been at the top of the list.
Yeah, I can understand. Because Saru took me a little while to get used to, but I've really come to enjoy Saru and how his character has developed over time. I think it's a tie between he and Tilly as to maybe who developed the most, and they developed in such different ways that it's probably not a fair comparison.
It's great.
So. I feel like we could go on and on. It's too bad we're limiting ourselves to one episode, but I really appreciate the depth that you brought to this, and I hope folks. I hope we've encouraged some folks that if they're not Star Trek Discovery watchers, maybe will go and check it out, even though we warned them not to because of the spoiler factor. But yeah, this is a really, really good episode.
Yeah, I agree. It's at the top of my list for season 2.
So when you're not watching Star Trek, all the series, because clearly you're taking notes on all the series, where can folks find you, and what else do you do?
Well, apparently they can find me sitting on the couch in front of my television taking notes on various Star Trek series, as one does. But when I'm not doing that, I'm probably sitting at my desk or out at a meetup or something, talking about Text Expander. So textexpander.com. And people can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Gamet both places. And I get around. I'm easy to find.
Great. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. We will do this again. I guarantee you. You gave me a long list of some of your picks, and I want to get you back on and take on some of those because you picked some really great episodes. And especially after this now, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on some of those. So we will do this again.
I am looking forward to it because this has been awesome.
I am too. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Trek Favorites. You can see the video version of this if you're listening to the audio version on our YouTube channel, as well as on our Facebook page. And you can also find us as at Trek Favorites on Twitter. And of course, I'm at Chuck Joyner on Twitter. Until the next time, thanks for joining us. Visit TrekFavorites.com to access all our shows, watch the video versions on our YouTube channel, and connect with us on Twitter and Facebook as at TrekFavorites.